another edition of Conversations with CASA, a monthly show produced by Texas CASA that focuses on issues, trends, and resources impacting the child welfare system. My name is Vicki Spriggs. I'm the CEO of Texas CASA and your host. Because of the pandemic, we're still filming remotely, so anything is likely to happen. We'll just roll with it. My guest today is Chadwick Sapenter, and Chadwick is actually filming from Missouri City. Chadwick is the founder of Sapenter Insurance Services. Chadwick combined his passion for sports and youth to create the nonprofit Central Texas Football Academy, which helps Central Texas area athletes gain admission and graduate from college. Chadwick has a passion for, for advocating for children in foster care and for the professionals and families who have dedicated their lives to work as social workers, mentors, and volunteers for young people in care all over the United States. Chadwick has traveled the country sharing his story of trial and triumph in the face of unthinkable odds to inspire and motivate those serving our nation's most vulnerable and forgotten citizens. Chadwick and his wife, Kimberly, founded the Chadwick and Kimberly Sapenter Foundation. Through their foundation, they provide financial support and resources to nonprofit organizations that work in the areas of foster care and adoption and STEM. They have also provided scholarships to first-generation students who come from poor families to attend trade and technical schools. I also want to note that Chadwick joined the Texas CASA Board of Directors earlier this year. So please join me in welcoming Chadwick Sapenter. Welcome, Chadwick.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. It's really good to see you, Vicki.
It's always good to see you. You're a young man with a great story. So if you would you tell us a little bit about your story, your experience in foster care, your CASA volunteer, and how you managed to beat the odds to become the person that you are today?
Certainly. So originally, I'm from San Antonio originally. I was born on the east side of San Antonio. My father was a heroin addict, and his drug use ended up taking his life. He got the AIDS virus from using drug needles. So he died when I was about 8 years old, which left me and the older sister, two younger brothers, with my mother, who had some mental health issues. Now, my mom's a phenomenal woman, one of the most strongest spirited women that I know. But if you've dealt with mental health issues, you know, it can take the best of us. That makes sense, especially untreated. And so that's really the environment that we grew up in, which led to us being homeless, bouncing from place to place, from school to school, a lack of stability. And eventually we went to live with a family member who was pretty abusive to my brothers and I, made it clear that she didn't want us there. And CPS got involved. My brothers and I got placed in foster care together, thankfully at the same placement, which did make a huge difference for us. And while we were at that placement, we had prior, I guess prior to going, when CPS first got involved, we got introduced to CASA just through the court system. And our CASA volunteer was a man named Leslie Foster, older Black man, gray hair, real clean cut gentleman. Very, I didn't grow up with any strong men around me, but so to see him, it was just impressive. I was just blown away by his grace, and he was very, very stern, but he was also very, very tender. So I didn't know those two things could coexist like that. Anyway, we ended up getting placed outside of San Antonio. And Mr. Foster was one of the first people to come see us. And he was encouraging, he was uplifting. He let us know, he was like, look, the situation that you're in does not have to define you. If you put God first and you're willing to work hard, then Chad, you can do anything. You guys can overcome this. And that was the last conversation that we had. And to him, I don't know if it was this profound statement, this mic drop moment for him. But for me, it blew the doors off of everything that was in front of me, because the reality said that foster care is terrible, that children are going to be bounced from place to place, because I was watching it happen. Abuse will be overlooked in some placements, because I was watching that happen. But here's this man somehow breaking through all of this mess and telling me that things can be okay. And that made a huge difference. And then not just to me, but to my younger brothers and some of my foster brothers also. And so from there, I graduated high school, went on to play college football, stopped playing college football because I had a son and I had my two younger brothers who I had to take care of, so I needed to work. Finished up at school, and from there, it's just been a journey of starting businesses, failing at starting businesses, struggling to get things done, and it's been a process to ultimately get to a point to where even through all of those hardships, we can look and, we know we're extremely blessed to be where we are. But not just me. My two younger brothers have made very successful lives for themselves. My foster brothers, and I have two that I'm very close with that, we talk and text every single day, who've also built very successful lives for themselves. And I don't think it's a coincidence because we know that's not what happens across the board, but it's something about having things intervene to shape your mindset and get you calibrated in a different direction. Because when everything around you seems negative or hostile, to have something positive to even chew on a little bit, to have just a little bitty tiny piece of hope just made all the difference for us. And a large part of that hope came from my CASA volunteer, Mr. Foster. Obviously, there were other influences, but that was a big one.
Powerful. Thank you. I remember when you spoke at our Notes and Nosh, a Texas CASA fundraising event back in 2019. And actually, you and I go much further back. I think it was what,
2009 or 2010.
Yeah, right. Yeah, where you spoke at an event that in the juvenile justice arena I was in, and Chadwick was an invited speaker. And I think you had just started speaking then. I'm not sure where you were in your journey at that point, but every time I've seen you speak, you definitely you lay yourself bare and you share your story, and every time there's been a standing ovation. And so most recently it was the Texas CASA for us, the Texas CASA fundraising event in 2019, and then the following year it was the National CASA conference. And then who all else knows, and I don't, where you've spoken since then. But you are an inspiring speaker, and you talk about the realities of being in care and the qualitative difference that CASA volunteers make. And you do this, and you're running businesses. What is it that motivates you to tell your story? What keeps you sharing your message with people?
I appreciate you asking that. For a long time, I was very ashamed of my experiences. And I spent a large part of my life trying to run from that reality. So you get to college and you get to just be whoever you want to be. You can make up because you don't know these people and they don't know you. And I spent a lot of time pretending and just wearing different masks and just trying to project myself to be something that I wasn't, to be honest. And then success started happening, right? And so it fed my ego, and it fed like this idea that I could wear these masks and I could just pretend and I could just act like, I was okay and that my experiences didn't have an impact. And then all of a sudden, we had a real estate business in 2000. I think we started it at the end of 2007. Well, very shortly after that, the real estate market was destroyed in 2008, 2009. And so all of my masks that I had used to just project and to pretend were gone. And that was right around the time that we met. And that was right when I had made this change to say, if I grew very comfortable with understanding that life was no longer about me, that my experiences, I can't just hold them in. And if I can help other people, I want to be as transparent as I possibly can. But also in the process of that, and I didn't know it then, it's been the most therapeutic thing that I've ever done. It's helped me as a husband. It's helped me as a father. It has been the greatest piece of therapy, being able to say, I don't have to pretend anymore. This is all of me, and I'm gonna lay it out. And I don't need to be accepted by anybody because of it, because it's not about whether or not somebody accepts my experiences. They're my experiences. And like right around the same time, I got invited to speak in Utah. I don't even remember the name of the organization. And this is my first time ever going to Utah. I don't think I've been back since then. But I was there, and I was still trying to figure out how do you tell your story in a way that is actually impactful and not just kind of listing out a bullet point of facts about your life, right? Because that's not very engaging. Well, anyway, I wasn't there yet, but I was just talking, and there was this young woman who, after the event, she was 16, and she came up to me and she handed me like this letter, right? It was like this folded, notebook paper, basically. And I didn't pay attention to it, but she told me, she said, Chad, I don't need this anymore, right? Thank you. And it was a suicide note. And that, I didn't feel like I was impressive, right? And I wasn't even trying to be impressive, but it let me know that there are people who, all of us have experiences. Some of them are more tragic than others. I couldn't identify with that young woman's story. My experiences were not hers. Hers were not mine. But somewhere in the middle of all of this struggle and trying to understand how do I live life in the middle of feeling this pain that feels very real, somehow it was helpful. Now, I couldn't tell you what the young woman was doing today. But in that moment, she told me I helped her, but she certainly helped me. I said, no matter what, I'm going to share my story, and I'm going to figure out what that looks like. No matter what, I have to figure out how to do this, and I have to commit to this, because if it's helping people, then Chad, you have to help people. Our stories are not for us. Our stories are for us to go out and to pour into other people. And then with business stuff, to be an entrepreneur, you have to be very comfortable with ambiguity and uncertainty, and the harsh realities of failure or making mistakes. And I've made a whole lot of mistakes, but the thing that I can always go back to is like, well, I'm not homeless. I'm not in foster care. I'm not, because that's, the floor. Everything else it's all positive. It's just hard. It's not impossible.
It's beautiful and powerful. Because I think some people get stuck where they are because it's oh so bad, and they don't realize, you know, they can make that change. But and more importantly, I want to go back, and this isn't something we discussed earlier, but you did share it in a couple of different settings. You talked about when Mr. Foster took you on a walk outside of the foster home you were in, and had that your situation doesn't define your life conversation. And you mentioned here how it was a light bulb moment for you. But what you didn't talk about here was how you went back and the conversations you had. If you don't mind, because we have time, will you talk a little bit about that? Because this is where one person creates a ripple that creates a tsunami and
I get
changes
chills.
positive difference.
I get chills thinking about it right now, because it's. I mean, and when when you look back at things, it feels like is this real? Like, is this real? And I'm like, yeah, this is real. But I feel like that about everything. Man, like how is this even where we are? But anyway, so Mr. Foster, so we got placed in this placement in Seguin. General perspective, the placement got closed down. That tells you all you need to know about the placement, right? It wasn't a voluntary. They decided not to be foster parents anymore. But anyway, Mr. Foster shows up, and I think it felt like we were there for 6 months. It may have been a couple weeks, right? But it felt like we were there a long time, and just hadn't had anybody from back home, not an aunt, not an uncle. Nobody was calling to check on us, or if they were, we weren't getting the phone calls. And so you start to feel pretty distant, because now it's survival mode. Okay, this kid's been in 10 placements. Well, I don't want that to happen. Well, what's a RCT? What? Like, because this is all very new. And some of these young people, this has been their life, right? It's been since they were 2 years old. They've been to placement. I've been adopted, been back. And so it's scary. It is terrifying. And I'm like, okay, no matter what, I'll do whatever I have to do to protect me and my brothers and make sure that we're not moved around, right? So anyway, all this is going on, but it gets pretty dark and lonely. Mr. Foster shows up. He knocks on the door. And he was he's just a well put together man. The last time I saw him, he looked the exact same, right? And he's like, let's go for a walk. And they had it was probably about 15-acre property, right? And so we go for a walk and we just kind of get to the edge of the fence that blocks off the property. And that's where he just stopped me. He said, Chad, look at me. And and it was just very stern and very intentional. He was like, look at me. Like, this situation does not have to define you. I don't know what you're going through. I have no idea what you're going through. I haven't been through this. He said, look, if you are willing to work hard and you put God first, you can do anything. And I believed him. I believed him so much that I went and grabbed my two younger brothers. Those are the first people I grabbed. And I took them and I said, hey, I need to talk to y'all. Look at me. And I told them the exact same thing. This situation does not have to define us, right? If we put God first, we work hard, we can do anything. And they started believing me, right? And we were telling all the kids that's in the house, right? And some of them even believed it too. And so, and now, if you look at it now, because of this moment, and who knows what would have happened without this moment? Maybe everything ends up the same. I highly doubt it, right? But I can't tell you how many thousands of kids I've talked to. Like 10, 100,000, I don't know. A lot of kids over the last 10 years or so that have been in the system. And I tell them the exact same thing. Like, I don't have this is it. This is just me. This is my story. And look, here's all I can tell you. Look, listen, this situation does not have to define you, right? I don't know what you're going through, right? All that you experience and feel about your parents and your family and the system, okay. But it doesn't have to define you. If you put God first and you are willing to work hard, then you can do anything. You can overcome this. And this is it. And the only thing I probably add when I talk to kids is like, look, you gotta stay away from drugs. You gotta stay away from alcohol. You got a shot. That's it. If you can keep your head clear, you got a shot. You can overcome this stuff, right? But here's the thing. These are plenty of tens of thousands of kids I don't know. Who I do know are my brothers. And I look at how they're living their lives, and I look at their families, and I look at their children, and then I know where we're from, and I can see that this has had an impact, right? Now, none of us perfect. None of us have it all figured out. There's plenty of stuff we would do different and do better, right? But I can look at it and I can say, this is pretty incredible. Case in point. So when I had a insurance agency in Austin, both, like, two of my brothers that came to work for me, and then they left and they started their own business. Well, my foster brother, Thomas Hobson, he came and worked for me at my agency, right? He leaves, he decides to open up his own agency. I know I'm moving out of the Austin area. He buys my agency from me. This is my foster brother. You know what I mean? This is my foster brother. That's incredible. Like, that is incredible. And he's thriving. And so, listen, maybe we're in the same place without Mr. Foster going out of his way to just come drop, some nuggets of wisdom. Maybe, who knows? So you can't, no way of knowing now. But I do know that it had a profound impact because for whatever reason, the man had the audacity to speak positivity and hope inside of a situation that felt hopeless. And that didn't make sense to me. It was radical to me. It was radical, and it was it was offensive at first, because how could you say that? Like, of course you don't know what we're going through. But then when you take a step back and you're like, actually, the man just said I can do anything. Like, anything literally means anything. And now the only ceiling, or the only governor that will prevent me from accomplishing anything is what limits I decide to put in my mind. Right. And I think that's what most of us do. Even now, it's true for everybody who's watching this. Like, no matter how far you are along in your career, no matter where you are in your life, you think, well, I don't have time and I can't, and I'm not able to. And if I would have married this different person, then I would have more time. I shouldn't have. All of that stuff that we tell ourselves, we put these limits in our head about what can we do, especially when it comes to stuff like CASA, where it can be easily become secondary to say, how can I get involved? What can I do? And he would say, well, nothing. I can't do anything. I know I struggle with that, right? Like, I know I struggle with that right now, right? Because of how I want to be involved in what I do, and measuring that with the responsibilities that I have to my staff, to my family, to all these other things that are going on. But it's nonsense, because we can do anything. There's literally nothing that is going to be able to stop us except our willingness to solve problems and to find solutions for the things that might be in our way. And there's always a solution. It always is. And so it's hard for somebody to convince me that that's not the case, because I don't know another way to think. And I might be foolishly optimistic, but how do you explain me being here? It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense at all. And not just me. How do you explain my brothers? How do you explain my foster brothers? I don't know, because we know what the statistics and the data says. So something happened, and it's incredible.
Thank you. Which leads me to my next question. What advice do you have for CASA volunteers?
Uh, I think being a CASA is one of the most important responsibilities, maybe outside of being a parent, right? Like it is incredible the impact that you can have on somebody's situation by being a voice for them, because children, quite frankly, don't have one when they're in these situations, whether it's they literally or infant and are unable to speak up for themselves, or um, it's just the nature of the system, right? Like ultimately, you have to have somebody who's advocating for you. So what I would tell CASA is it's simple. Um, on one hand, I'm sorry that your job is needed. Like I am sorry that this is the situation that we are in. Um, but I'm thankful for those who have decided to say, I'm going to engage and I'm going to lean in and I'm going to step up for these kids who are not mine, who won't even appreciate it, whom I may never know 10 years down the road, right? Um, if there was any message, I would just say, listen, look, I just want you to know that my story exists because of somebody out there like you. And it's just simple as that. Like my story exists because a CASA volunteer said, I'm going to press in and I'm going to step up and I'm going to speak up for them. And it's going to be as simple as that. That means everything. Now, I don't know how many other people Mr. Foster can point to and they're saying this. Maybe it's all of the kids that he interacted with, maybe, right? We know that that's probably not the case. But I know one thing, I have 4 children. My oldest son is 18. My youngest son is 3 years old. They are all beneficiaries of my relationship and Mr. Foster's influence in my life when he was a CASA volunteer. And there's no way around that. There's no way around that. So for everybody, the volunteers who are listening, it's like, understand that the seeds that you plant today may not bear fruit for 20 years, right? And maybe it's like 3 out of 10 trees that actually like bear fruit, but man, it's gonna be a lot of fruit. Like it's gonna be a lot of fruit. It's gonna be so much. Like, so just keep planting the seeds and keep watering it and keep speaking up and keep saying the weird stuff that you don't think the kids are listening to, because like I'm a parent, so it's just a normal thing, because my 18-year-old son, he thinks he knows everything and he doesn't know anything. So I thank you, and I am thankful for you. And I just want to encourage you that your work matters more than you may realize. And the impact that you're going to make makes my life possible. And it makes the stories of my brothers possible. And it makes my foster brother's story possible. So I would just say, just keep pressing and don't give up and don't give in. And all of the pain and the frustration of, are you actually making an impact? The answer is 100% yes, right? 100% yes, you're making an impact. And you'll continue to do so, even if you don't see the results of it right in front of you.
There you go. Yeah, I hope you heard that, volunteers, because that was loud and clear. So, same question, but as it relates to young people in foster care, what advice would you want the volunteers to pass on to them?
So here's what I think it's 2 things. When I talk to young people, I tend to not tiptoe and approach it with the most sensitivity. My reason is, life is going to hit you in the face and it's going to be hard. And we can be frustrated about our families forever, but you got to live and you got to figure it out. So on one hand, I would say, look, young people need, the simple thing is this. It's easy to dismiss somebody who you don't think understands you, right? And so young people do, it's like, how would you know, miss? You don't know. How would you know, miss? You don't have to, like, I can't relate to you. And then you got volunteers who feel like, well, I can't really relate. Like, who's this kid from the hood? I don't know what he's listening to. This music sounds crazy. I don't know. This is weird, right? But very simple is this. All of us are dehydrated of a lack of motivation. Like, we are thirsty for hope. Like if the last year hasn't showed us, like, we are thirsty for hope. Like, we are looking to be poured into. We are looking to be believed in. And that is absolutely true for the kids that you're going to deal with on a day-to-day basis. So it's as simple as this. It's finding the silver lining in their dark cloud, even when it seems like the most foolish thing to be saying or thinking about a kid's circumstance, because you're like, well, I've read the case file. This is not good. But in reality, you're right, it's not good. It's not going to be good whether you choose to speak life into the situation. And it's not going to be good if you choose not to. But at least if you speak life into the situation, you can chip away little by little at that wall of darkness and pain and a lack of trust that exists. And we have to be willing to say, all right, no, it's going to be okay. Like, you can actually do something, right? Like, and then I do a poor job of this because there are stories that you can point to, even if they're not your own, but you have your own story too. You do have your own story. There's stories that you can point to that aren't your own to say, well, yeah, you're right. Maybe I don't understand, but this person does, and he figured it out. Yeah, but no, no buts, no buts. Projects in San Antonio, crack sold everywhere, violence everywhere. San Antonio at the time was one of the most violent cities in the country. Death on the street, people being murdered, nearly killed 2 times. What are we talking about? What do you mean? No, there's no way. If, like, you're not the exception. Like, and this is what young people got to understand. I want them to say, you're not, your struggle is not the exception. There are people who have overcome worse and figured it out. So you have two choices. You can make an excuse and you'll use this for the rest of your life as to why you can't overcome it, or you will take ownership of it and you will use this as fuel and build a story out of it. The only time people want to hear your story is if you make something positive out of it. Nobody wants to hear a sad story that just stays sad. Movies don't sell, right? So, and I don't know if I answered the question, but
You did. Yeah, you basically said be real, be
yeah.
present, and don't let the person settle for an excuse or a reason to fail. Don't let the person own a reason to fail. Give them the hope.
And
I
then
really liked
like,
your.
look, you have these moments, right? I don't know if it's hours or days or months or years, but look, it, the accumulative effect of constant putting positive when somebody's trying to give you the excuse you want. You know what will happen? Ultimately, even if the person decides that they don't do anything positive with their life, or the circumstances that they grew up in overcome them for whatever reason, they'll still be able to point back to say to Mrs. So-and-so or Mr. So-and-so is the only person who believed in me, the only person who said something nice to me, the only person who looked at me and told me I can be something, right? Now, that what that does is then the person can't say, well, nobody ever cared and nobody ever believed in me. And we have to take that story away from people, because then it's like, well, nobody cares, therefore this is why I'm here. Well, you just be the one person that cares. So now they can't say nobody. Then they have to, well, most people didn't, right? Or some people didn't, but it was one person that did. And that's a beautiful thing.
It is. It absolutely is. Thank you. Um, Two more questions. One is, as I noted when I was doing your introduction, you joined the Texas CASA Board of Directors in January. And again, I'm thrilled to be able to work with you in that capacity as well, or this capacity. And I want to ask you, what motivated you to say yes when we asked you to join
Yeah.
our board?
So a couple of things. I I I want to be involved with CASA. I don't know what that looks like and in what capacity this is in, right? I didn't know. After the National CASA conference, that was a close to a chapter for me in a sense, right? Like, that was 10 years ago when we met, and I think we were in Corpus Christi or wherever it was. Like, that was a goal. That was written down. That was a goal to be able to do that. And it happened. And so I had made a decision to say, okay, I have to transition how I think about service. And then I got the call from Texas CASA, and the opportunity was there. And then even still, it's like, okay, all right, how can I want this. How do I make this fit? Because I really care about Texas CASA. How do I make this fit with everything going on? New baby, new business, new all of these things. How do I make it fit? So for me, it was just about saying, how can I use the resources, however little or however much they are that I have, to pour them into things that I care about. And then the other part of it was I have a lot of friends who are very successful, but also very selfish, right? They do really well, but are just very, very blind to problems and pain that exists in our country. And what I wanted to do is to say how I want to make it easy for them to be able to leverage their resources and to connect them to things that they may not be aware of. And a lot of that happened, like when the George Floyd situation happened, everybody wanted to figure out how to pour in. And I'm like, hey, it's like all of these kids right here that need you, right? Majority of them look like you. Majority of them come from where you came from, and they need to see you. And so joining the CASA board, it was the next step in me saying I want to take this serious. And to be honest, I'm still figuring out how to make myself like how to give all of myself in, right? Like what does it look like? Because it's a huge responsibility and an honor that I take seriously, right? So it's still this thing, but I know I want to connect because Texas CASA has plenty of people who support Texas CASA that are aware of it. There are a lot of people who need to be supporting Texas CASA that are not aware. And I'm like, I know a lot of people who aren't serving anywhere, anybody. And I'm saying, okay, I can bridge that group of people and I can try to bring them into the fold and one way or the other, whether it's through service, whether it's through financial support, to be able to bring them in to say, hey, here's an organization that is on the ground, getting their hands dirty with the most vulnerable group of kids in this state. We can support and we can help. And so that's a lot, but it was all of those things just kind of combined. And the National CASA Conference, me wanting to figure out how to be involved and what does that look like in the future, me wanting to be a bridge for like my friends who are not serving or supporting anything, to be able to connect them to something that they may not even understand that they care about, and then bring it all into the fold. And if it was going to be a place, it was going to be Texas CASA for me. If it was going to be a place that I mean, it wasn't going to be anything else.
Thank you. Thank you. As the time runs out, I would ask if you have any final thoughts you want to share.
One, I want to say thank you. It's, I've been an admirer of yours for a very long time. And you may not know this, but you and Joe Gagan, the former CEO of Texas CASA, at that event, both of you changed my life. And the reason why I even started speaking anything was the conversation I had with you all there. You were encouraging me, and being I don't have I had no relationships with affirming aunts, mother figure like Black women, right? I didn't have that, but you affirmed me in that moment. You did, and it wasn't much, but you said, you know what? Hey, I'm proud of you. Good job, and that stuck with me. That made a difference. And then Joe Gagan said, "What are you doing? You need to clean up how you talk." And you need to do this. People need to hear you, right? It was those two things that changed my life. So one, thank you. The only other thing I would leave with is this: is like, look, the work that you all are doing matters in ways that you may not be able to quantify on a chart or in a spreadsheet. But to be willing to say we're going to commit to impacting lives of the most vulnerable people. It's everything. It's everything. It's more important than anything else that we have going on, in my opinion. It is important work that makes a direct impact, that is actually being the hands and feet on the ground, taking care of the most vulnerable people. And I think that's something that's a mandate for all of us to be living by. And so I'm very proud to be associated with Texas CASA. I'm very proud to be a child of Texas CASA, and to now be on the board of Texas CASA. It means the world to me.
Well, it means the world to me, to hear everything that you've said, to see the person you are, and as Michelle Obama says, we're all becoming. The journey never ends until we die, right? So the person you are and who you are becoming. I think we are blessed and fortunate. I think this has been a boomerang blessing. Mr. Foster imparted it. Interesting enough, his name is Foster, and you were in foster care.
Right.
But he imparted that blessing to you, and you took it, you shared it, and now you're bringing it back to Texas CASA. So thank you for that. And it is amazing how um, positive energy flows. I think you've been probably the most inspirational speaker we've had in our conversations because typically we're sharing information, we're talking about resources, but in terms of bringing a lived experience message of incredible positivity and realism, you're it. So thank you for that as well.
I appreciate you saying that. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure to see you. It's wonderful to have you on our board. It's been a wonderful opportunity to sit and talk with you today. And I just want to thank you for joining us today. And I would like to thank you, the viewer, for joining us for this edition of Conversations with CASA. We'll see you next time.